Welcome to another episode of Pork Chops, Rice and Peaches. I'm Richard.
I'm Noah.
And we're giving you a peek into the conversations that we have regularly around our house about movies,
TV shows,
video games,
and everything in between.
And one of the things that we have hinted at over the first couple of episodes is a topic that you first brought up to me a few months ago, and that is that it's possible that the nature of movie watching has changed.
Yep, I wholeheartedly believe that the way we view movies has changed.
So, as a little bit of background on this, one of the things that I've always taught you was that a movie has to stand on its own. It has to have a beginning, a middle, an end. It has to have interesting characters, a compelling plot, an obstacle for the protagonist to overcome.
Yep.
And that a sequel, in order to be an effective sequel, must have all of those elements, and the characters need to develop in some way as to give us a compelling reason to watch them and to buy into their character growth, their development, and their changes.
Yep.
I have always used that as the standard by judging a sequel until a few conversations back you said something that made me kind of put the brakes on.
So I've had this theory floating around for a while now, and I guess you can't really say it's a theory if it's in practice, but the evolution of storytelling over the movie medium and across multiple mediums now has reached a point that I don't think we've seen it before. With the advent of the cinematic universe. So the MCU has changed, at least the way I view movies, and it really didn't hit until Avengers Infinity War. And it occurred to me that I don't see this movie as a standalone movie. I don't think if you showed someone brand new Infinity War that it would get them interested in the MCU. I don't know. Some people might. It might grab some people's attention, but based on your prerequisites that we just listed, I don't think Infinity War stands by itself. Thank you for that, dog.
Well, we're going to have to take a break.
We'll pause for just a second.
I want to kill the boy.
Right.
I want to kill the boy. I like the dog. It's the boy I want to kill.
Alright, we are going to resume back to good audio quality in 3, 2, 1. There we go. So, as I was saying, with the advent of the cinematic universe, I think we've seen a slight evolution in the way we take in stories overall. And the reason for this is Infinity War as a movie does not have a lot of character development for the protagonists, or what most people would label as protagonists, because the protagonist of this movie is Thanos. Technically. The story is about Thanos. It's a Thanos origin story. It's about Thanos overcoming the odds of facing off against all these heroes and achieving his goal. And I say protagonist because not very many people differentiate the term protagonist and the term hero, because there's a huge difference. The protagonist is supposed to be the person whose story you're following. The antagonist is the person who's trying to stop the protagonist. The hero, by default, is usually a good guy. That's what the term hero usually means, and villain would mean the opposite of a hero, a bad guy. But Thanos is obviously a villain in the Tony Stark, Captain America, Doctor Strange. They are the heroes. But in Infinity War, you don't really focus on their character development. You get a lot of time spent on Thanos. And the reason we can afford to sideline all these characters is because we have had almost 10 years of prior setup. Infinity War took no prisoners when it came to do your homework. And that's something that 20 years ago even, if a movie told you that you had to go do your homework before watching the movie to understand it, critics and fans would have ripped the movie a new one. But the MCU, at least in my opinion, has earned the right to tell you to do your homework. If you don't know who Tony Stark is, if you don't know who Captain America is, if you don't know who Doctor Strange is, if you don't have an idea of the powers at play here, the powers that be, that's on you. You've had 10 years, and with the amount of money and the popularity of these movies, you don't have an excuse. If you want to enjoy Infinity War, I think it's almost crucial to at least have seen some of the mainline movies. Now, back in 2012, Avengers didn't have this attitude. The original Avengers didn't have this attitude. It still took snippets of time to establish each character. You see Tony Stark's character in the opening scenes of Avengers. You see him very much being the egotistical billionaire playboy philanthropist that movie coined the terminology of, that he so proudly proclaims. You see Captain America struggling with adjusting to modern life. You see a brief glimpse into the character of Bruce Banner, and you see Thor and his character, and the development in that movie is the characters learning to work together for the first time. So the original Avengers didn't have this mindset of you have to go watch the movies, because there had only been 4 movies at that point. That would be outrageous, especially in the beginning stages of this new form of storytelling, the cinematic universe, that is being done on the scale that the MCU did. You couldn't get away with saying, go do your homework. You had to reintroduce the characters. You had to establish their personalities and what they were going to struggle with in terms of working together. Their major flaws that they were going to have working together in this movie. So, but Avengers Infinity War, almost a decade later, says, nah fam, you gotta go back and figure out who these characters are, because we're not gonna hold your hand through this movie. It's time for the villain to shine. So if you don't know Tony Stark's personality, if you don't know Doctor Strange's personality, if you haven't seen Civil War, you don't know what the status quo is in this movie. And it gets away with it because it's invested so heavily into it. So we have this new... It goes against that idea of it has to really stand on its own. Like a sequel, if you think of good sequels, like let's say Terminator 2, it reintroduces its characters. It introduces new characters. So that if you're just coming to the series, if this is your first entry into the series, which a lot of times sequels are,
yes,
you get introduced to the status quo, you get an update, you get reintroduced to these characters, and it falls neatly into your definitions of what would make for a good sequel. Because it reintroduces the characters, it still has a character arc, it still tells its own story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, again, Infinity War still checks some of these boxes. Pencil broke.
You know, 2 sharpened number 2 pencils and a sheet of paper versus the computer. I am slowly changing. I had to use the phone to access some information. There's a couple things that come to mind as you're talking about this. One, if you are correct that Thanos is the protagonist, that's a protagonist that is seen through the eyes of the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's told from a different perspective.
That's a completely different perspective of looking at a protagonist. Now, I won't argue, too much against that, because one of the comments that I've made before is that Thanos is a character that you almost agree with.
Mm-hmm.
You understand Thanos. You kind of feel for him a little bit.
Yep.
Right up until the point he decides that the solution to the problem is to randomly kill half of the population.
Yep.
And then we kind of draw the line there.
Yep.
It's really not fair to ask your audience to do their homework. Now, that it's not fair. It really isn't.
It's not fair.
But it begs the question: what is the demographics that they are aiming for with the Marvel Cinematic Universe? If you are looking for the young crowd, the modern youth of America, you're looking for the 14-year-old kid or boy, and up,
mid-20s,
right? And do the younger teenagers have the knowledge of the source material? In this case, decades of comic books. Do they have the knowledge of the source material? I would argue they don't.
Well,
hang on.
Go ahead.
I would argue they don't, because so much of society is focused on video games and video game playing. I could be wrong, but I don't think they do. If they are looking for the age range, the adults who grew up on the comic books, you're talking about people my age, just a little bit older, and anywhere from 15 to 20 years younger than me. And I didn't grow up reading comic books. That would have been my older brother. And I'm not certain how long he did. When I look at scenes in a movie and I scratch my head and I say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Captain Marvel, so powerful, so strong. Why didn't she perform better against Thanos? Right, I truly, really, Scarlet Witch's battle with Thanos, I would have loved to have seen her just clean as
she was about to. She was about to.
And she would have been such a surprise victor if she had taken the glory away from Tony Stark and Thor at all. But I look at things that happen in the movies and I say, why did they make that choice? Where did they come from? And you will say, well, in the comic book series, and name something that is one of the 1980s storylines from an alternate universe with Captain's had one too many Diet Cokes and his brain is altered just a little bit, and I mean you get all of these weird
far off of actual comic, and I know you're completely BSing me with that statement, but you're not that far off.
If the writers are going to pull in all of these threads from these different branches of the comic book universe. Star Wars does the same thing. Again, the question of the source material. Once we got past episode 6, all right, and then you have these decades where there are no movies produced, but you have novels produced, and you have graphic novels produced, and you have Ewok Christmas specials, and you have all of
droids.
And then suddenly the writers are pulling in all of this different source material, and that's too much to expect the average moviegoer to do. I am the average moviegoer.
Oh yeah,
I very truly am. So are they doing this? Do we have to change the way we look at movies? I think they're going to have to be very careful, because they could end up losing audience members if we have to work too hard.
So So here's my counter, mostly to your first point. Your source material in this case, let's go with the MCU to start with, is not the comics. The source material is the movies. The MCU is its own contained story. It makes nods and references and uses storylines from the comics, and sometimes you can use the comic storyline to explain it away, but you still enjoy a lot of these movies, correct?
Yes, I do.
Civil War, they
Yes,
wanted to do Civil War. It had to be Cap and Tony because the original storyline was Cap and Tony. So while there are rules that are pretty much set in stone because the original Civil War storyline was such a popular storyline, you wouldn't get away with doing anyone else in those roles, and quite frankly, there was no one else fit to them. The tension for Civil War is still built up within the story of the MCU. So I think when I say do your homework, I'm talking about in the mainstream movies that most people would have seen. Like, you don't need to watch Ant-Man to understand Infinity War. If you've already seen Civil War, you know he exists, and he was introduced well into Civil War. If you mostly follow the Avengers to Avengers Age of Ultron, to Guardians of the Galaxy, to Civil War, to Endgame, and Infinity War, you will probably get the general gist of the story and be able to understand it just fine. And that's what I mean when I say do your homework, because
you will miss the life-size Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yeah.
And let's face it, that was one of the highlights of the movie.
Best scenes in all the MCU. But funny you bring up Star Wars, because Star Wars presents this other take on this opinion, is that the way we digest stories has changed. Because I think we're now entering this new level of multi-layered storytelling as well across multiple mediums, and Star Wars is the perfect example because it's the only one, at least one of the only ones to successfully do this on a mainstream level, and we're seeing this with Clone Wars and Mandalorian. With Star Wars, you have your main 6 movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I said 6, not 9.
Yeah, I caught that.
So, you have your main story, right? And then you start expanding on it with books and novels and TV shows and video games. Well, at the end of the day, you don't need to watch or read. You don't need to watch Clone Wars to understand the general gist of the first 6 movies and to get the story of Anakin Skywalker's life.
Okay.
You don't need it. It helps because 2 and 3 are steaming piles of garbage. I'll be nice. In terms of qualities of movies, I love them, but they're not the best storytelling. And watching Clone Wars definitely helps develop Anakin's character a lot better, but it's not necessary, and it expands the lore in a way. So
Episode 4 was not the best movie
it
either.
really wasn't, but it was a lot better than 2 and 3. I enjoy it more than 2 and 3 personally, but let's call to prove my point. Let's call the movies, the 6 movies, level 1 of the story. Okay. Most people have, if they've watched Star Wars, have watched this. They're level 1, just to, not labeling people, but just to condense it, we'll say they're level 1 fans. They watch stories, they enjoy it, they don't need anything else, they're satisfied with the story. We'll take level 2 fans and say they're people who have watched Clone Wars, maybe Rebels, and probably Mandalorian. The TV shows are a second level. They're getting more content out of the series and the world and the universe that they enjoy, and they're learning more about the way it works, the different planets, the different characters that live in there. And when you get a movie like Rogue One that brings in a character like Saw Gerrera, you didn't need to see Clone Wars. You didn't see Clone Wars before you saw Rogue One.
No.
And I don't think you needed to understand that Saw Gerrera is mostly a rebel terrorist, essentially. He's an extremist.
You don't get that in Rogue One as well as you get it in Clone Wars.
Keywords being as well.
But you don't need to know it. What you need to know in Rogue One is that Saw Gerrera was entrusted with Jyn safety.
Yep.
That he abandoned her at some point.
Yep.
And he So his character is questionable.
Yes.
He's not a nice person.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's basically the gist that you need of the character. Now, if you've watched Clone Wars and you've watched Rebels, you already knew that the minute they mentioned his name. So you get rewarded in the level 1
if
tier
you've seen Clone Wars. Right.
But it doesn't detract from a level 1 viewer's enjoyment of the movie. So,
okay.
take it another step further, you've got books and comic books and video games that add to the story, again, in deeper detail.
Right.
That enhance the story overall to a larger degree. And when new media in the level 2 and the level 1 acknowledge parts and bits and pieces and little snippets of lore, you get rewarded.
I see where you're going.
And it's not necessary to the enjoyment of the level 2 or the level 1. So, a great example of this is the recent episode of Mandalorian, which just came out, the first episode of Mandalorian Season 2. There are 2 things in it that are directly ripped from extended universe material, a book and a video game.
Right.
The Krayt Dragon has been referenced in Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic 2. It was a mission.
Yep.
At the end of the first episode, spoilers if you haven't seen it, they pull out the pearl. The Tusken Raiders hold up a giant pearl.
What was the pearl?
So that was another one of those like Easter eggs for the detailed fans who've seen it, you know, but it's not necessary to your enjoyment of the show.
I assumed it was another thing that the Raiders like to eat the way the Jawas needed the egg from
It's a very rare it literally is just a pearl in lore. It was supposed to be very rare and could be used to make a lightsaber out of it. It had like kyber elements to it. In lore, made from like kyber crystal.
That thing's big enough to make a kyber cannon.
Yeah, pretty much.
That was gigantic.
They and that's just a brief explanation of it. But that was thrown in for the people who know what a Krayt Dragon
Are
was.
we going to see that used in the future in this series? That's a big question. Because if that's such a big deal, and they made a point of camera zoom in, show the Tusken Raider holding it over his head. All right.
I think it was again more of an Easter egg, but there's a more important. Yeah,
they owe us an explanation. If they just leave that and never address it again, it's really unfair to the average viewer.
If I hadn't told you this,
we would have talked about this.
If I hadn't told you what that pearl was, though, I could have never mentioned that pearl at all. And the significance of it.
You and I have not had a chance to talk Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1. All I did was send you a very short text message
we were talking before this episode about it.
But not long enough. We were also setting up and taking care of the dogs and everything else. Okay, so another series that is a movie series that has a source material that it is based off of.
Yep. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
The entire James Bond. We have 24 movies. We're waiting for the 25th to come out.
Yep.
And if you look at the James Bond lore, all right, that has been and rest in peace, Sean Connery. We just lost the original Bond. You have a character that you don't have to have read these books in order to understand who this character is.
No.
Now, the benefit of knowing who the character is in the books, and for anybody who doesn't know Casino Royale, the very first Bond novel, you have a character who is not the James Bond that Sir Roger Moore portrayed. The campy, cheesy one-liners, everything works out in the end. You have a gritty character. And the grittiness of Bond and his view on life and his his ease at disposing of human life is something that is not explored in the movies as well as it is explored in the novels. And so when you get a reboot, every time they hire a new Bond actor, you get a slightly different take on the character. We did not see or start to see the real side of James Bond from the novels until Timothy Dalton came along with his two movies, roles, right? Yeah. And he took over the roles. Pierce Brosnan, while entertaining, first couple movies were good, but he kind of slipped into that whole cheesy, campy Roger Moore type. And then we get Daniel Craig, who brings grit and realism, and the day after a fight scene, you see that he's all cut up and injured, right? And you get the emotional side of Bond, the falling in love with someone, having his heart crushed, going on Quantum of Solace, which so many people hated Quantum of Solace, and I so thoroughly enjoyed.
It's just a revenge tear. It's a man who's lost something going on tear. I love it.
Well, but what you get is a movie that starts 15 minutes after Casino Royale ended in the storyline, and you see this man on this emotional tear, right? Which very real, you know, very understandable, and but it's not dependent on all of this.
Yeah,
and that's fair.
That's fair.
That is fair movie making. We don't have to do our homework.
No.
In order to
enjoy
the character development that they bring to the Bond movies.
And I don't think you do. But Via, you just admitted it. If you're watching Quantum of Solace, it picks up 15 minutes after Casino Royale.
Yes.
Movie-wise.
Yes.
So what I think a lot of those people might be upset about is that they're not, you know, if they just come into Quantum of Solace, they're immediately thrust into action that is essential to the plot. Normally a Bond movie starts with an unrelated chase scene or fight scene.
Sure.
It always starts with another sequence. If you're coming in fresh and you don't if you haven't seen Casino Royale, are you going to understand why he's on this revenge tear until about, I don't know, a good 20 minutes into the movie, I think is when they start to establish it? So wouldn't that feed into it helps to see Casino Royale and the evolution of watch a movie to understand its sequel? Because Quantum of Solace, it's a chapter 2 in a 2-chapter story. It's like this right here, all right, Lord of the Rings, all right, are 3 movies and 3 books that tell the same story, all right? Unlike Harry Potter, which is just like, here's a self-contained story, here's a self-contained story, here's a self-contained story, here's a self-contained story, it's essentially 3 massive chapters of one overarching story. And people loved this!
I will agree with you on Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. But that's 2 out of 24.
And I'll give you that.
You know, and the history of the movies doesn't require
you to go
a base
back
knowledge
and watch
of the source material.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't require you to have watched the previous 20 movies in order to understand it.
No.
So, you know, they might be changing a little bit. And the interesting thing I find about this conversation, and one of the reasons why we needed to talk about it, and we've talked about it in the past, is stodgy old English teacher, right, is being forced to confront a couple of his own biases, some assumptions that were made a long time ago and haven't been revisited until you and I started having these conversations.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's it's something that I am going to have to adjust to as a moviegoer, and I'm going to have to stop digging my heels in so hard on it must be done this way.
Well, especially since we're about to with stuff like The Mandalorian, you're starting to see it cross over with other elements. So you watch Clone Wars and Rebels, and some of that stuff is now coming to fruition in Mandalorian, or at least it seems like it's about to.
Well,
not getting into spoilers.
Well, but
because I know what's coming.
The rumors online.
The rumors online of
we're not even
going to
touch
character.
Yeah. A character that I would
love to see.
And if we're going to see that major character, there's 2 things that I hope. One is that we get to see that character performing at their best in live action. The
hopefully.
same way we
Hopefully.
love to see Vader,
Yep.
I mean, go, and what we talked in the previous episode that we want, right? I want to see this character go. We're not going to say anything that's a spoiler.
Nope.
But
if
the
you
other,
know, you know.
Right, and if you don't, we'll talk about it later.
After season 2 drops.
The whole
completely.
thing, right? So, but the other thing is they better hire a good stunt actress to pull off the moves. If we are going to see that character go, right? We
I want to see them pop off. Maybe not this season, but eventually that better pop off.
And
so
you can. I dated myself. I let actress slip.
Yeah, it's okay.
So real quick, the question that I had on the bottom of the page here, and I've been waiting for a break. You're talking about Thanos is the protagonist of Infinity Wars, and I'm curious, where does Ultron fit in the Age of Ultron? Because Age of Ultron, I mean, Ultron was really kind of a cool.
He was a cool concept.
Antagonist.
Yeah, he was a cool antagonist.
Is he pure antagonist?
Well,
are we seeing the Avengers team through his eyes? I mean, is there another perspective shift, or is this just a formulaic?
That might be something we have to discuss, because I do think Age of Ultron suffered from not being able to explore its concepts as well as it could have. We should bring this up in another video. Let us know if you're interested in that one. Well, I think briefly, I'll say he is definitely the antagonist of the movie, and the villain of the movie. Is he a bad one? Mileage varies. He's got a more interesting viewpoint than half the villains in the MCU.
Well, he does, and of course, now I'm biased. I really enjoy James Spader's work.
Same.
Yeah, right. Okay, so
he had the perfect voice for Ultron.
He did, and the perfect attitude for Ultron.
Sassy robots. I love sassy robots.
K2SO. Right.
Give me more, please.
Yeah. The voice acting has become such a big part of
movies,
of the entertainment world. And I read an article just recently that Mark Hamill always wanted to be a voice actor. I mean, he focused so much on his desire to be a voice actor in this article that I read that I wondered why he ever took the part of Luke Skywalker to begin with. But his Joker is fantastic. And he has a voice cameo in Mandalorian season 1 as
he's the robot in the bar.
Right, as a robot bartender.
Yep.
And I'm enjoying the work of James Spader and others who really bring these to life. The entire voice cast of Clone Wars. Tremendous amount of fun
top notch.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to bring this back around. We did drift a little here at the end.
Yep, sorry.
I'm going to bring this back around. So I'll wrap up this point about the evolution of storytelling briefly. I think that the movie industry needs to be careful with this new format. I definitely agree with I think this will be your point, is that if they're going to develop this new form of storytelling, they have to earn the right to say, do your homework on our story. If you're going to build a cinematic universe, do not expect success, and do not expect people to be willing to go and see every single movie. You still have to earn an audience. You still have to tell an entertaining, engaging story that people want to see. So if you're going to invest into telling a story on this massive scale, that will, that may at certain points, for like a big movie here, or a big movie here, an event here, you should put in the work, put in the effort, and earn the audience's pre-established knowledge.
I don't think it will. We should ever get to the point where a movie franchise can earn the right to force us to go do homework. They are a They are an entertainment industry. They've got to sell a product that stands on its own.
Yeah.
And a perspective shift. I'd love to have this conversation in 20 years from now.
Yeah.
I run a household. I homeschool your sister.
Yep.
I've been a stay-at-home dad for years. I do all of the extracurricular activities that we've brought to you kids. I don't have the time.
Yep.
To go read all the source material.
No.
And so I have.
Again, source material being the movies in its own story, not the comic books.
As long as they keep the knowledge in the actual preceding movies, I'm okay with that. I can live with that. If we have to do anything outside of that, they're going to lose audience members.
If Episode 9 of Star Wars had said you have to go watch Resistance, I would 100% be in your court,
right? Okay,
because that would be bull.
Well, and remember, this is a for-profit business. Where they don't just want you to go to the movies. They want me and my wife and my kids to go drop $12, $13 a ticket. Yep. So we're going to drop $70 in that range just to get in the front door. Yeah. We're going to support the movie theater with, these could be $150 events. Don't make me work too hard.
Yeah.
Right. Give me compelling story. Give me interesting storylines
that you want to have seen, so that when they do say, "Okay, we're going to base this movie on," and I think I've emphasized too much the do your homework. What I mean is, you have seen most of the MCU.
Yes.
Before going into it, you had already seen it and gotten there. They earned your tickets by telling you good stories overall. You enjoyed it enough to continue going back.
Yes.
So when Infinity War rolled around, they were able to coast off the fact that a lot of people had seen these movies prior.
And we didn't have to see any more character development in the main characters because we had seen it over the years.
So I think if you're going to tell multi-layered, if you're going to tell it over like such a broad spectrum of mediums, if you're going to tell a gigantic overarching story, that the level 2, level 3, level 4 stories need to supplement the level 1 story, and while the level 1 can make callbacks and references here and there, they shouldn't detract from the story that the level 1 is telling. Okay. That goes for any medium.
So we didn't touch, and we probably don't have time. I don't know where we're sitting at here.
Yeah, we're close to 40 minutes.
Did X-Men meet this or miss the mark on it? And that's going to have to be another conversation. Thank you for tuning in today for Pork Chops, Rice, and Peaches.
Do you think that the storytelling across multiple mediums and across the same medium has evolved like I do? Or are you still in the court of it has to stand on its own as a sequel and be its own movie? Let us know. I would love to have this chat with you.
And if you like what you're hearing here, please hit subscribe somewhere down there.
There's a bell. You can hit that for notifications if you're interested in keeping up to date with our content. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Camera audio quality really, really is shitty. Good mic's paused, so it's not working. Hey. Awkward silence. I'm not pausing the camera. I have an Ahsoka pop. I also have a Hawkeye pop. Also bobblehead. The Eevee's not a bobblehead.